Billy Blue, my knight in shining brindle. Welcome to another episode of A Poet Reads to Write. Today I would like to take part in another booktube tag. Yes, I know, that's 2 of my last 3 videos have been tags, and I don't take part in a lot of tags anymore. But this is a tag that really caught my eye, it caught my fancy, and I had to be involved with it. I was tagged by the wonderful A.T. Pennington over there at Away with Words. Away with Words, sorry. He does take me to other worlds, of course. Away with Words with A.T. Pennington. Such a marvellous channel that really spotlights the booktube video as work of art in its own right. And the tag that he has invited me to take part in is to share some of my favourite book covers. And I think you can hear from my voice, I'm pretty excited to take part in this. I love really good book cover design. I'm not saying I have a perfect eye for design. I certainly can't do any design myself. I'm utterly useless. But I do know what I like. And probably most of the books in my library I have bought partly because of their cover. You know, I do love really good book cover design. And when I'm writing my professional reviews of new books, I nearly always have at least a paragraph or 2 about the book cover design. You know, I don't think that when you're reviewing a book, you should only look at the contents inside. You know, I think you should judge a book by its cover. Book cover, you know, really good quality book cover design is important, I think. So this is a video tag that I'm really excited to take part in. You're meant to do like a top 10 and maybe do a countdown from number 10 to number 1. I'm too chaotic, way too anarchic to do anything like that. So what I've done is I've decided to go around my bookshelves, choose very quickly without too much thought, because I could have easily shared a different 10. You know, I could have chosen almost anything else from my shelves. So without giving it too much thought, trying to do a bit of variety and books that I also haven't shared on other videos too often. So for example, you know, that precious copy of The Hobbit that I have, which is now just falling apart, that my precious mum bought me so many years ago. You know, that is a book cover design I think is wonderful, featuring that original artwork of the mountain by Tolkien himself. It's a beautiful book design, I love it. But I want to choose books and share books this time that I haven't focused on before, and a bit of a variety of text types. And as I said, I've just gone around my bookshelves and chosen books fairly quickly without too much thought. So this is what I've come up with. They are not my top 10. They're nowhere near it, but they're what I've chosen for today. And they're all book covers I think are marvellous. So let's get on with it. Poetry first. Why not start with poetry? Book cover design doesn't always come off, does it? This is my second collection of poetry called Fume. It's a work of post-colonial poetry situated in a very small Aboriginal or first Australian community called Borroloola in the Northern Territory, right up in the top end in Australia's far tropical north. I lived there for 5 years and worked with the people there. And this is a collection of poetry about that life that I shared living and working with the First Nations people of the Gulf of Carpentaria. When I wanted to find a publisher for this book, I sent it to the University of Western Australia Publishing. I really didn't think they would be interested, but I just sent it off. It was one of the major independent publishers of poetry in Australia at that time. So I sent it off on spec and just see what happens. At that stage, I was a very unknown quantity in Australian poetry circles. I published this quite a few years ago, more than a decade ago now. But when UWAP nibbled and they were interested in my book, they had two provisos. Number one, they wanted the book to be a minimum of 100 pages long, so that when it was, on that shelf in a bookshop, for people perusing around bookshops, book browsing, they wanted a spine that would, stand out and that might attract a buyer or potential buyer's eye. So the book had to be a minimum 100 pages in length, so it had some type of proper spine to attract some attention to it. The other thing they insisted on was they wanted this corporate type design, so that every book of poetry by UWAP all looked much the same. And so when people saw it on the shelves in that bookshop, because they would immediately identify this with UWAP, they would know it was of a certain quality, and so they might again be prepared to give it a go and maybe purchase the book. Philosophy-wise, I get it. Marketing-wise, I get it. Maybe it works, and maybe it did work. This book is almost out of print now, so it has almost sold the whole of the first print run. But I think this design is terrible. I had no choice over it. The colours, everything, you had very little choice. You had a choice between about like 6 plants to choose from. I chose the prickly pear because, as I said, this is very much a work of post-colonial art, poetry. So I wanted a plant that was invasive, that was not native to Australia. And the prickly pear I thought was good because of the prickles. It survived in a desert environment. It had those pricks on it. So I thought the prickly pear, of all the plants that I could have chosen from, it was probably the one that was most apt for what this collection was about. But I don't think this is a terribly good cover at all. In terms of the marketing philosophy, I get the project. And maybe it did work as well, but it's certainly not a cover I am proud of at all. So yes, good cover design. It doesn't always work, does it? Despite, the involvement of marketing and book marketing philosophy design. So I think that's an example of a book cover that doesn't work. Some poetry collections, however, that do work. Oh my goodness. Poetry is always a hard sell, so the cover is really important. Look at these. This is probably one of my favourite covers of any book anywhere in my library. Shane Strange of Recent Work Press, there in Canberra, my current publisher. He does the most miraculous book covers in Australian poetry, I think. He's absolutely marvellous. Look at that for a cover for a collection of contemporary poetry. It's a beautiful collection of poetry too. Moya Pacey, Doggerland. It's an absolutely marvellous book. I was lucky enough to review this collection about a decade ago for a journal called Plumwood Mountain that you can find here in Australia. But I think that is just an absolutely marvellous cover. There's not a cover better than that in the world in any text type. I just love it. The vibrancy of the colour, the mystery of, looking at this girl in this boat from behind with the crow or raven there at the front of the boat, and, what is she looking for? The beautiful colour, juxtaposing the green of the boat with the red of the dress. I think it's just an absolutely marvellous use of vibrancy and colour. I love it. And then look at this, Honey by Kate Llewellyn. Kate Llewellyn's a South Australian Adelaide poet. I think that's an absolutely marvellous image. Just the lusciousness of the colours and the use of yellow and, again, Kate Llewellyn, Honey. And it's a lovely collection of poetry as well. But my goodness, what a cover. Sticking with Kate Llewellyn, this is a publisher called Hudson. I'm not sure that Hudson even publish poetry anymore, unfortunately, but another book by Kate Llewellyn. Look at the cover once again. The choice of this incredible abstract work of art for a contemporary work of poetry, a beautiful collection by Kate Llewellyn called Sofala, which is a little town just west of the Blue Mountains in central west New South Wales. I think it's, again, a marvellous cover. My goodness. Oh, and here's Dorothy Porter. Was predominantly a verse novelist. Very, very popular, much loved Australian poet. She died, unfortunately, of cancer quite a few years ago, way before she should have passed away. But she wrote about a dozen verse novels, and this is just one of them. She wrote one verse novel called Monkey's Mask, which, believe it or not, is this lesbian detective thriller. And it was actually turned into a major feature-length film. Can you imagine it? A work of contemporary Australian poetry being turned into a film. Wow! But this is a book she's written called What a Piece of Work. This is a verse novel that was set in the Parramatta Psychiatric Hospital many years ago, you know, around that sort of mid-early 20th century mark, when mental health care was not always good, you know, not very pastorally orientated. So what a piece of work. This is about a very dark, dire psychiatrist and the mischief, the experiments they get up to with the poor inmates of this Cullen Park Psychiatric Hospital. And I think you can tell from the cover, not only is it the title marvellous, what a piece of work. Whoa, Dorothy Porter, what a title. But look at the darkness, the somberness in that cover. I think it's a marvellous cover, really suggesting, you know, the dark, foreboding theme, subject matter that is contained within this verse novel. It's marvellous, I think. And this is a book that was brought out by Picador. So they gave her a terrific cover. And so it's not all woe be gone by me. Look at this for a cover. This is my current collection of poetry, again by Shane Strange at Recent Work Press, and it's my collection called Cactus. The only thing I sent to Shane when he accepted my manuscript, and he said yes, he would love to publish it, he asked me what I would like on the cover, what my thoughts were, and I just said I would love a portrait of a greyhound, and I wanted the portrait to really suggest fragility, brokenness, you know, that sense that the poor dog was literally hounded, maybe even hounded to death by the racing industry, by those sorts of things, because this is very much a collection of confessional poetry about my own houndedness, my own falling apart and disruptions, or at least disrupted mental health states. And Shane came up with this, and it just shows once again what can be done. Yes, Shane Strange has a great eye for design, and he has incredible IT skills, so he can make things happen. But this is an image that he found on the internet that was completely free for us to use, apparently. Shane put it on my cover, and look at that. The way it's all come together with colour, with the fonts, the beautiful close-up image of the dog, suggesting exactly what I said I wanted. I couldn't have got a better cover. If I had no matter how long I would have prayed for one, I couldn't have got a better cover anywhere. Shane Strange, Recent Work Press. If you want a collection of poetry in paperback, so they're quite affordable, they open always beautifully in the hand, so they're a wonderful reading experience. And if you want a collection of poetry that is an impeccable front cover, Recent Work Press in Canberra with Shane Strange. He does the best covers in Australian poetry. I am really, really proud of that front cover. Oh, Shane, you're such a magician. And sticking with poetry, but now moving to the literary biography. Here's a biography by Thomas Dilworth of the English mid-20th century poet and painter David Jones. I think, again, this is a cover that features a painting, a self-portrait by David Jones. And yes, I realise, therefore, this book, because you're doing a literary biography of a poet and a painter, and it was a painter who did a lot of self-portraits, you had every advantage, didn't you, to try and come up with a cover that would be a real knockout. But it still had to be pulled off, you had to still put the money into the cover and actually make it all happen. And I think that's just a marvellous cover. It's a beautiful use, I think, of the self-portrait by David Jones. There is a real sense of fragility, of naivety, maybe even innocence in that cover. Marvellous, vibrant colour, like the Moya Pacey Doggerland. I just think it's a marvellous use of colour. I love the clean font. I just think it's a lovely cover. David Jones is a very, well, he's actually quite a difficult poet to read. He was one of those modernist poets, so he wrote lots of very long, very quite difficult modernist poems to read. In parenthesis, anathemata. They are quite difficult, long, modernist poems. But he is marvellous, and I was so pleased when this biography came out. For me, I'd sort of struggled with some of that long, modernist poetry for years. I'd really wanted to love him because he was a Catholic convert like me, and I was really drawn to the experience of being in the world that David Jones seems to inhabit. But yes, I'd always really struggled with the poetry, to be honest. He was a veteran of the First World War. There were lots of interesting things going on there. So when this biography came out, I had high hopes that this would be my way into the poetry. And indeed it was. I find often, particularly with really difficult creative work, if I read a literary biography and just learn something about the person, it does seem to give me ways into the text. And having read this wonderful biography, I was then able to return to the poetry and read that as well. David Jones. This is a marvellous biography, and I think it's an incredible cover. All right, another work of poetry. The famous, talking about, again, long poems, long modernist poems, very difficult to read, not always accessible at all. But here's the wonderful Basil Bunting, Briggflatts. Look at that incredible cover. I just think, again, the use of vibrant colour, the suggestion of, the medieval Gospels of the Lindisfarne Gospels. There's so much going on in this cover, and it does suggest what's going on. And the other thing I love about this, if you're going to publish a difficult, fairly inaccessible, long work of modernist poetry by a very little known, inaccessible poet, Basil Bunting, look at this book. It's not only got an impeccable front cover, it's got this beautiful back cover with ways into the text, a lovely author portrait of Basil Bunting. It's got Basil Bunting reading the poem himself on CD. Look at that. And as well as having the long poem, it's also got some very short paragraph essays by contemporary poets reflecting back to the life and achievements of Basil Bunting and what Bunting has contributed to their own poetic. So I think if you're trying to sell a difficult, fairly inaccessible, long modernist poem, this has got a lot going for it. Basil Bunting, Briggflatts. I think this is a literary marketing masterstroke. I don't know whether it worked and sold lots of copies, but it certainly sold a copy to me. I love it. All right, my last work of poetry. This is a wonderful collection of poetry by Derek Walcott. It's an illustrated work. So I've gone into a collaboration with this other Caribbean painter called Peter Doig. And it's a wonderful collection of poetry. You can see it right through the book. You've got a poem of Place by Derek Walcott celebrating a particular place in the Caribbean. And then you've got the accompanying Peter Doig painting to go with the poem. It's a marvellous collection, and I think it's quite a wonderful front cover. Maybe the use of the font in Derek Walcott and Peter Doig, Morning Paramin, maybe it is a little bit, it takes away a little bit from the beautiful image behind. Maybe that could have been a little more subtle, but then again, of course, if you're working with a Nobel Prize winner, you want his name fairly pronounced, don't you? Because that's what's going to sell the book. But it is a marvellous book, this, an absolutely marvellous book collection of place poetry, all set in the Caribbean, and it's got marvellous paintings, and they're all on beautiful art paper, really well reproduced. And I think, again, it is a lovely, clean front cover. All right, what else have I got here? My Eric Hobsbawm, a famous British mid-20th, late 20th century Marxist historian. He specialised in modern European history. This is a marvellous biography on Hobsbawm by Richard J. Evans. And again, I don't think it's a perfect cover, but because I'm so much in love with Hobsbawm, like, E.P. Thompson, these are Marxist historians, mid-late 20th century Marxist historians I've always just loved. They had a great self-effacing, sly, wicked sense of humour. They didn't take themselves or their Marxism too seriously, but they were so idealistic, really dreaming of a better future for all of us, not just for some. And this is a marvellous biography on Hobsbawm. I think he's marvellous, and this, as I said, mid-late 20th century British Jewish Marxist historian. And I think that's a lovely, use of clean lines. You've got, with the glasses there, and he was all known for that, of course. I don't know, I think it is a very simple cover, but I think it does really draw my attention to it. There is a little bit of sly, self-effacing humour there. There's a bit of comic wit. I quite like that cover, and actually the more I look at it, the more I like it. Very clean, very simple, nothing much going on, but I like it. All right. Again, looking at Marxist cultural creatives, that incredible Caribbean writer C.L.R. James, Beyond a Boundary. This is not only a book about cricket, although it is a marvellous celebration of cricket in the Caribbean. But it is also looking at life, beyond a boundary, beyond the boundary, to looking at Caribbean life through the prism of cricket possibly, but going beyond that white picket fence to look, post-colonially, to look at the gender politics, race politics, all sorts of things. This is just a marvellous collection. It is a beautiful cricket book. It has this incredible long description of what it is to witness the perfect cut shot in a game of cricket, the sound of the ball coming off the bat. I just think this is a marvellous book. I love it to bits. I love cricket, and in particular, I love Caribbean cricket. And even more in particular, I love C.L.R. James. He's an absolute marvellous cultural commentator, Trotskyite Marxist cultural commentator. I think he's absolutely marvellous. And this is just terrific. And look at that cover. The dynamic use of image in that, you've got to actually turn it this way to see what's going on. I love the way it's just been turned up on its side to add even more dynamic sense of motion to it. It's a marvellous image. A great celebration of Caribbean cricket, of this fast bowler has just released a bouncer, and you can see the batsmen doing everything they can to get out of the way of this thunderbolt before it rockets past their chin. I think it's an absolutely marvellous colour. I love the colour, the dynamism of the image. Beyond a Boundary. It is a terrific title for a book of cultural history, reflections on life and what it is to be in the Caribbean today. It's an absolutely marvellous cover for an absolutely marvellous book. C.L.R. James, Beyond a Boundary. Oh boy. All right, here's another one. Francesca Stavrakopoulou. She's this incredible English atheist Bible scholar. She's a professor of ancient religion and Old Hebrew or Hebrew Bible at one of the universities in the United Kingdom. An atheist Bible professor. Wow! Here's a book she's just done, a biography, if you like, of God, of Yahweh. And look at that cover, the richness of it. These wonderful footprints in gold going up comes from an ancient archaeological site of the footprints of God going across this rock shelf. I just think it's a marvellous book, and it's a marvellous cover, I think. I just think this is terrific. It opens up, it's got a great spine, great back cover as well. I think this is marvellous. Francesca Stavrakopoulou, God and Anatomy. This is a marvellous biography of God that is trying to give God back to his body, to actually find the body of God. So in a sense, what it does is it starts at the beginning of the book at the toes, at the feet of God, and it traces all references to God's bodily parts right up to the hair and the head, going through each chapter by chapter. So in a sense, it's a godly striptease. You've got the body of God, and you're seeing how the each part has been described in the Bible itself, going right up. It's not a sacrilegious work at all. It's a serious work of Bible scholarship, specializing particularly in the Hebrew Bible. I just think it's a marvelous book. I love it. I love the project. I love the book. And I really like this cover. All right. Mirka and George's. Mirka Mora was this wonderful, again, early mid-20th century Jewish Australian painter. She did a lot of public collage work. She lived down in Melbourne there for many years. Look at that marvellous cover. Just the vibrancy of that blue, the lovely clean font. And then, of course, the use of one of her paintings, which just is full of such naive, innocent delight. I just think it's a marvellous cover. Mirka Mora, wonderful mid-20th century Australian Jewish painter from that Melbourne context. And I think that's a lovely cover. I love Mirka Mora to bits. Marvellous. All right. Someone else that I've always loved. This guy is an incredible late 20th century, early 21st century gay icon in Australia called Robert Dessaix. For me, he was fluent and academic in the Russian language. He did some university work teaching Russian. And then he did a lot of work on ABC Radio. He became a much loved ABC radio commentator in arts channels and that sort of thing. He was much loved in the Australian context. He still is today. I just love Robert Dessaix to bits. And the other thing I love about Robert Dessaix, look at all these covers. I think all of his covers are magnificent. What Days Are For. He specialised in writing memoir and literary essays across a range of subjects. So nearly all of these books I'm about to show you are all literary memoir or travel memoir. But look at that cover. Absolutely marvellous. Here's another one. As I Was Saying. Wonderful cover. Reflecting back, I suppose, on his work with ABC Radio. Twilight of Love. This is a real wonderful travel memoir. Beautiful. Cover again. Here's another one, Night Letters. Look at the cover. Just the use of the art forms there. Marvellous, I think. And here's Corfu, a novel. But again, it's a real, exploration of, celebration of travel memoir. Marvellous cover. But the cover that's probably my favourite of all of them is this one, And So Forth. Look at that. A beautiful portrait of the man, Robert Dessaix, sitting in a favourite chair. The way, it just focuses on the simple image of just him looking back in that chair, the lovely gold font in his name and so forth. Oh, and just the use of brackets as well. It really is like just an afterthought, and it's the name of the whole collection. I just think that's a marvellous cover. I love everything by Robert Dessaix, but that is, I think, a particularly beautiful cover. And the last one I would show you, my work with the Folio Society. Look at this, that incredible slipcase. You pull the books out. You get this paper so they don't mark one another. And look at those for cover designs. Oh my goodness. This is Hannah Arendt, The Origins of Totalitarianism. She was sort of a fellow traveller with some of the Frankfurt School, that school of, early mid-20th century German, predominantly Jewish, Marxist intellectual or cultural theorists. She wasn't really a member of the Frankfurt School herself, but I guess she was a fellow traveller, that sort of cultural Marxism. And this is an incredible work looking at the beginnings of totalitarianism, trying to account for the rise of totalitarianism in Nazi Germany and in communist Russia. These are just marvellous. Her writing style is fantastic, so dramatic and vibrant. She's done some incredible work, Hannah Arendt, an amazing early mid 20th century German Jewish cultural theorist and historian, cultural commentator. These books are just marvellous, and Folio, my goodness, I think these have just unbelievable, the use of the font, the colours. I think it all really comes together. The spine, the simplicity in the back cover as well. These books just have marvellous design, I think. Likewise, look at the slipcase. It's a really solid, sturdy slipcase. And again, just that simple use of vibrant colour. The hard-edged, of the design really suits the subject matter of the origins of totalitarianism. I think it is really suggested in the choice of colours, the hard-edged lettering, the real geometric design. I just think it's marvellous. Folio really did a terrific job, I think, in bringing out these books. All right, A.T. Pennington. I am so pleased that you go. I need to get Moya Pacey's book, don't I? I love this front cover that Shane did for me. Absolutely marvellous. But I think this is probably one of my favourite book designs ever. It's certainly probably my favourite book front cover in my library. Moya Pacey, Doggerland. Oh my goodness. When it comes to really, really fine covers for contemporary Australian poetry, Shane Strange, Recent Work Press, get into it. You'll get the best covers in the world, I promise you. Thank you, and bye for now.